Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. So, first things first, last week's topic on the malign Portent story. Lots of good thoughts, suggestions, commentary, tinfoil hatting on that. My own personal, I tend to agree with Doom and Darkness. I hope he's right. He was talking about sort of the distinction between how the Stormcast are being framed in the story and how Nagash is being framed in the story. And my only parting thought for that is, have you heard the good word about our savior, Nagash? So I think that's a very exciting turn and interesting way to take on the story from the point of view of the normal humans of this vast realm. So I'm very excited for it. With that being said, let's turn to this week's topic. So this week, I actually want to give a shout out to Victor Case, who put up a video that made me really want to talk about this more in depth. I thought, let's make it the topic of the week because it's something that I feel pretty strongly about. So the question that he said was the question he was answering, I guess, was why do I paint? Okay, why? Why do we do this? If you're watching this, then theoretically you are playing some kind of war game, and that tends to necessitate painting of some kind. If you are not a painter at all and you get everything commission painted, well, I guess this doesn't apply to you. But I think those are rare. I think even people who often use commission painters still paint some stuff themselves. And so the question is why? Why do you paint? I think there's a lot of interesting answers to that across the spectrum of engagement in this hobby. You know, I saw a post on like Facebook the other day as I was reading through a couple different miniature groups, and somebody had said, here's my whole army. It took me 4,000. They were it was a mock conversation, internet style, and it's here's my whole army. It's 4,000 points, and it took me 5 years to paint. And the other person in the conversation said, "Oh, how's it play?" And I said, "I have no idea." Um, and I bet that's not a super uncommon story. I've always said this is an iceberg hobby. The average one of us probably spends, even if you're just a speed painter, the reality is you probably spend more time in the area not playing around the hobby, a majority of which is painting, but not all, um, than you do actually playing the game. I'm fortunate enough to get a game in at least once a week, but even then, that's 3 hours, 4 hours at most, versus me personally, I spend 40 to 60 hours a week painting every week. Uh, so, but even if you're an hour a day person or something like that, or you just binge on the weekends, you're still probably crushing your game time. So the question of why do you paint, and for me this is interesting. I think at least it's interesting to me. I don't know if it'll be interesting to you, but let's find out. I started playing Warhammer in '97 basically, and uh, I think I didn't really paint much of anything. I painted a few things here or there. I started with an Empire army. I still have the War Wagon I had originally painted for that, and I have a couple of the really, really horrible knights I had painted at that time. But it was such a different world of painting in the 90s. Basically, you could go buy a White Dwarf or other, similar sort of painting magazines. And that was really it. Like, I mean, I was on the internet every day, but there wasn't a YouTube, there wasn't a huge amount of, tutorials out there. Sure, a few people had blogs or something, but it just wasn't really a thing. So you basically got whatever was written up in an article and whatever the people around you knew or at your shop knew. And so, like, I remember when someone showed me what a wash was, and it was a sort of a revelatory experience. Um, it was much harder to advance. It was because not only did you not have good access to all these techniques, but it was also just frustrating because you paints with some with exceptions weren't as good, or there weren't as many good craft paints, or sorry, not craft paints, as good miniature style paints out there. There was much more just craft paints. Um, Certainly, the Games Workshop paints, many of them from that era, are still a standard even to this day. Some of the inks and such, and I don't disagree with all of that. But that was it. Like, it was that, and there wasn't really a lot of access to it. When I would go to my local game store, they had some Games Workshop paints, and that was basically it. I'm sure there were stores that were better outfitted than mine, but again, it's not like I'm ordering on the internet that much in 1997. So there it was. And so I think the whole thing was largely frustrating. I think at that time I painted largely because I felt as though I had to. Like, I had these miniatures, I had paid for them. They need to be painted, so hence I painted. And it was a chore and it was a task. Something to be done as quickly as possible. And I knew some good painters, people whose work I thought was good at that time. I'm sure if I looked at it now, I would think that it's doesn't look as good, but we tend to remember back a little more sort of nicely than it is with rose-colored glasses of sorts. But and so I would ask them and try to learn from them and stuff like that. But I remember sitting one night when we had sort of a paint party, and my friend was painting Dark Eldar, and he was literally like he had primed in black, and he was just like putting two little orange shoulder pads on them and an orange knee pad, and then like dry brushing them a light gray, and like done. And he would just angrily throw every one that he finished of his little plastic Dark Eldar into a bin, and just like paint, done. Everyone was sort of an angry completion. And I think that it was much more task oriented because I didn't get to feel as though I was advancing. When I came back to painting, I mean, I'm sure I painted a miniature or two intermittently in the intervening years, but again, never seriously. There was a period of time there where I was only playing a couple games a year. And when I came back to the hobby more full time, I guess, and started painting again, what I found was a whole new world. So when I came back in 2000, I don't know, 13, let's say, something like that, late 2012, I'm not even sure. What I found was, it had to be 2013. Yeah, let's say 13. What I found was that it was a totally different world to live in and explore. And why I paint now is because I have found in this hobby something that sort of creative fulfillment that in a lot of my other work I've never been able to find. I enjoy writing things. I've written several game books. That's one of them right there. I liked all of that. I've worked on a lot of different RPG products over the years. And all that was very fulfilling and fun. But I will say that this miniature painting in general has been more rewarding on some kind of fundamental level than I think most of those other pursuits ever were, or at least in a different way. The ability to not only have a sort of vision and a thought about how you want to make this thing your own, but to convert it, to paint it, to do all of it with your hands, and then to own it. Like, that's yours now. You did that. And that is yours sort of forever, is a really unique aspect of this hobby. And pushing myself to try to accomplish new things, to try new things, to eventually get into competition painting, which I've done a lot more of in the last couple of years, and discovering new things, sort of sucking at a thing, then being okay at a thing, and then feeling like I'm pretty good at a thing, has been an unbelievably rewarding journey to go on. I keep painting because I don't know how or why I wouldn't. It is a passion and pursuit that has become singularly enthralling in my life. I know that sounds really goofy and lame, and I apologize for that, but I find it unbelievably rewarding, the psychological utility of it. And I suppose part of that comes from the fact that, like, I have most of my armies done. I have the luxury now to, if I want to do an army a year or something. I'm not on any kind of treadmill. I'm not a very competitive gamer when it comes to my actual armies, so I tend to paint what I like. I don't find myself painting things I hate very often. I more or less just sort of follow my bliss with it. And what I have found that as I do that, this has become really uniquely rewarding in a way to not only create something I'm proud of, to express myself artistically, but to also connect with other like-minded people in the world, in the community of hobbyists and painters that I've connected to, and these friends that I've made, and I really do consider it friends, has been, again, incredibly fulfilling. So I think why I paint is for a host of reasons, but if I had to pick one thing, I would say that it is time in my life that I spend with zero regrets. And what I mean by that is, yes, it's just stuff, and yes, it's just little plastic toys, but I have the distinct feeling when I look back now at the, uh, I don't know, conservatively, I probably spend 1,500 to 2,000 hours a year painting, so it's a full time job. And when I look back on that, I don't regret a single one of those hours. For the most part. I mean, I'm sure I've done some awful rote thing for an army somewhere that I didn't super enjoy. But at the, on the whole, 98% or whatever. Um, and in that, it's sort of its own reward. And I think that as my life continues and I keep experimenting with things, pushing things, exploring things, and creating these, I don't know. To say little pieces of art sounds so highfalutin and ridiculous. So I'll just say creating these painted miniatures, because that I don't want to put on any airs. I can't imagine myself ever changing to feel like I would think it was a waste of time. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps it's, my tastes will change at some point and I'll get fascinated by something else. Who knows what the future holds. But I do know that if I was to be sitting on my deathbed in 2 weeks or something and I looked back, I wouldn't feel regret over that time I've spent, and I would actually be rather proud about it. That I put myself to some creative endeavor that I felt had greater meaning in both what I was able to accomplish myself and the people it connected me to. So that's why I paint. There you go. And that's this week's topic. As to why you paint. Why do you paint? Why do you keep painting? Do you push yourself? Do you seek to improve in your painting? Are you happy with where you are? Do you feel like you want to challenge yourself? Tell me about your hobby journey and why you do it. Is it just for the Army? You want to get that Army done for a tournament? Because that's fine too. By the way, no part of the story I just told you am I saying or purporting to have some nugget of objective truth. I'm not saying that there is a right reason. I'm just curious, because I think there's actually a huge spectrum of this. And I myself, probably like many of you, have had those different reasons at different points in my life. So I'm just fascinated to kind of talk it through and start the discussion. So there you go. I'll link Victor's original video down below where he talks about why he paints, so you can go check that out. Victor's a great guy, does a lot of great hobby content. Check him out, give him a sub if you haven't already. Which, if you're watching this, you probably know who he is. But that's why I paint. Drop your reasons down in the comments. Tell me about your journey. If you make a video response, of course, that will be linked down below. In last week's video, it's already down there too, so you can always go back and find any video responses. But as always, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.